All right, guys, so this is my current sewer flange situation. As you can see, this was not installed properly. This was actually, I hired a plumber to install this, and I knew right away that I would need to remove it and replace it. When you install a toilet flange, this and this should be on the side. So really, it should be more like that, so you can get your screws in, slide them under your bolts, and twist them to the side, and those should be able to line up straight across, because those two bolts that stick out of your toilet are going to go here and here. The way that they've done this, they'd have to go here and here, and my toilet would have to be at like an angle, or they'd have to go here and here. There's no way to get my bolts in here. So my plumber, I honestly can't. When I asked them about this, they said it wasn't attached, that it was just loose, and obviously it's glued in. So I'm just gonna have to cut it out and remove it. Ideally, the other thing too is the height adjustment. What I like it is when a plumber comes in and they just leave your tube, and then based on your finished floor height, you actually can then glue this on yourself after your tile is done. But that's not what happened here, so I'm gonna have to cut out and replace their work. I also want to note, if you're not experienced with working with sewage lines or toilets or anything like this, the gas that comes out of the sewage line is not safe to have coming into your home. So at any point while I'm working on this, if it's going to be a long amount of time before I have a cover back on here, like a toilet with water in the P-trap, I'm gonna have a rag or something in the tube so the sewer gases are not coming into the home and we're not breathing those in as we work, or if somebody lived in this property. Now in this case, I just have a wad of rags. You wanna be careful that you do not forget this, because if you put your toilet on, this is gonna create a clog. So it's there while we're working, but you have to remember to take it out at the end. Now I did find an option. I just wanted to show you guys. I'm replacing this because this is completely replumb, rewire, brand new house. I wanna have everything new. I wanna raise this up to match the height that I need, and I also need to figure this out for my bolts. But I did find this, somebody recommended this to me on Instagram, and I can't remember who, so I apologize. And this is and I'll put a link to it, but it's a hydro seat. Here, let me put a flange fixer. And this is to repair flanges if you maybe have some height that you can work with. But basically it has your two bolts built in. It has the front and back labeled. And if you didn't have this piece on here, you get a wax ring and it goes underneath, and then you mount that like that. You can have your bolts lined up, and then your wax ring bridges the gap. So if your height of your flange is already too high, this is not gonna work, but this is a great option if you're trying to make up a little bit of height difference, or you're just trying to repair your flange. However, this to me is way too low, and I don't want to use my wax ring as a height differential. I would just want to cut it out and replace it. But if you were in a bind, or you didn't feel competent in your ability to cut this out and replace it, this might be a good tool for you. And you can get these at your local home improvement store, or you can get these on Amazon. So this just gives you an option if you don't want to cut this out and go all the way into replacing it like I'm going to do here today. So in my case, the plumber stubbed off of the 4-inch main sewer line with a 3-inch line to go to the toilet. So I'm gonna have to cut off enough space where I can fit in a coupling down below onto the old pipe. I'm gonna couple in my new pipe coming up this way this is what's gonna be below that we can't see. And then ultimately on the top, I'm gonna attach my new flange. And so to cut inside of a pipe, if you don't have basement or cellar access, or you have a finished basement or whatever, you're gonna use a tool like this. Now I'm just putting this on my drill, but just to show you, this is just an internal PVC cutter. The only problem you might run into is if you need to cut deeper, you only have that much length plus how deep the nose of your drill can go. So you may have to get an extender for this, but I'm gonna start and see if this can reach in deep enough where I can cut as deep as I need to cut. I'll put a link to this as well in case you need to get one of these, because the biggest part of being able to do this from above, again, if you don't have access, is being able to cut the pipe from the inside. So I have my rag, I've pushed it down a little bit farther. One, that's protecting me from the gases, but two, anything that falls in, it's gonna get caught by that rag, so I'm not dropping a bunch of shrapnel and debris into my pipe. So I have felt that come loose, and I'm gonna pull out my current flange, the one I'm getting rid of. There we go. Okay, so now you can see down in my hole, I still have my rag in there. I have my old pipe, and of course, we want to make this really clean, so we're going to cut this up, and we're going to clean this up, and we're going to sand it so we don't have a bunch of burrs, because any mess on your pipe is going to make it less likely to have a good bond, and we of course don't want that. We don't ever want our toilets to leak. Now, before I rise this up, of course, like I had said, if you had just left your pipe and were attaching this after your tile, everything would be closer in and you'd have support underneath of it. But because I have done self-leveler, I've done my uncoupling membrane, I've done my thin set, and I've done my tile, if I just put this here once I raise it, that doesn't have any support under it, which we, of course, don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and measure this, probably just using my little flange. I can use this as a template, and I'm gonna cut out some pieces that will support behind this. So as I raise this up, I'm giving this a nice strong support so I have a solid flange in place. So I have my mark for where I'm gonna cut. So I'm actually gonna just cut this before I start with my Sawzall, and then we'll clean that cut up as well. So I've cut these little pieces of OSB. They're not perfect. It's really just so I have support that I can screw into. And I'm just fitting everything. I'm making sure maybe I'm about where I want to be with my height of my flange. And that looks about good to me. Now I'm just cleaning these parts really well before I prime and glue them together. I'm making sure there's no dust and debris. I'm deburring and making sure that there's no rough edges. I'm doing a quick test of my pipe, just basically eyeballing my alignment and just making sure that it's about the height that I want. Again, I can always cut another piece or even trim this down if I want to. So if it's too short and you glue it in, you're screwed. If it's too long, you can trim it. So I don't like to dry fit PVC or ABS because it's hard to get it back apart. You can if you're comfortable, but I just kind of like to line it up and see. So we're gonna go ahead and start attaching everything. I am using PVC pipe, and you can tell because this is white. A lot of plumbing is going to also be black, which is ABS. You use a different type of glue for PVC than you do for ABS. Now, with PVC, I have a two component. It's gonna be a primer and a glue. And with ABS, the black pipe, you just have the glue. So you may be using a different gluing process than I am if you are working with a black pipe. Now, one thing I want y'all to be really careful with when working with this beautiful purple primer and this blue cement is this stuff will stain. The same plumber actually ruined a shower pan that we were going to use by getting this all over it. So make sure you have it on a surface, and then you're careful with your surrounding area because it will, it is really strong coloring and it will ruin anything around it if you get it on it. So a channel lock will help you if you're having a hard time opening these. Again, very messy and it's very liquid. So this stuff really flows. It's really drippy. So I just want you to be super, super careful if you have a finished area around you that you're working with. So you're gonna go ahead and prime. So right now we're doing our connection piece first. So we're gonna prime the joint on both pieces. So around this edge, I'm gonna prime, and then around my connector piece, I'm also going to do a good prime coat. Now you're gonna get your glue really well on both pieces of your connection too. So you're gonna get it on the outside of where you're connecting to over here. And then you're also gonna get it inside of your joint. Now in my case, it's gonna be easier for me to get this on this joint and view my coverage. So I'm really gonna pay special attention to making sure that I get a really good coating on here, since I can't see my other component as well. Now we're gonna push down firmly, and then we're gonna twist, and then we're gonna hold it for about 30 seconds because it will kind of try to push itself back out. So you wanna hold it until it gets a nice hold. Now I'm just gonna wipe off my excess. We're gonna do our connection piece right here. And so we're gonna basically repeat the same steps. So I'm gonna take my primer and I'm gonna prime inside my connection. Make sure I get full coverage. I'm gonna take my primer and prime this. Take my glue inside my connection. Then I'm gonna glue my pipe that's going inside the connection. Okay, then we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna push down and twist. Then we're gonna hold for about 30 seconds, because if you don't, that kind of suction that's being created with your adhesive and your primer, it may try to push it back out a little bit. So I always hold it a little bit longer than I think I should, just for my peace of mind. Okay, we're gonna wipe out our excess. One mistake I want to show you from me cutting with this little tool is it will melt the plastic. So if you go too slow, see that little edge? It's a little bit of a melt. So if I'm going to just go ahead and get this scraped and trimmed off, but if you're going to cut with that tool, maybe go a little bit quicker than I did so it cuts clean through and it doesn't have time to melt. If you do melt it like I did, you can take a really sharp chisel and just get that off. But for me, this piece is accessible. Had I done that on the less accessible piece, deeper down in my floor, it would have been harder to get this off. So just try to do a little bit quicker cut than I did. Make sure that those don't line up with where my other screws have to go. Okay, I'm gonna move this one over a little bit because I don't wanna conflict with where my mounting screw goes. Now we're gonna go ahead and start the process of attaching this. Now, like I showed you when this was attached by the plumber, I don't know if you could call yourself that when that's what you do. It wasn't, you have to keep in mind that the bolts that your toilet's gonna attach to, they have these little kind of legs that flange out and it's gonna slide in and then you're gonna twist it into place. So you really want, and if you have to get a ruler and draw a line straight across there, you just need to make sure that these 2 points are straight across so you can at least line up your little bolts when you have your toilet. So that's gonna go about there. Now I am just gonna only push this down as far as flush with my tile. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my primer and my adhesive, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the joints where we prime to prep, and then we go ahead and we adhere with the glue. Before we move on, make sure you remove whatever you had in your line so that you're not creating a clog for yourself. Now we're gonna keep in mind where we need our bolts to line up, right? Now your screws that you're gonna use are always gonna have to be a corrosion resistant material. But the point of the corrosion resistant material for your screws is sometimes you've all seen a toilet that leaks or has an issue. If any moisture gets in here, you don't want it to rot out your screws. So you want something that's going to be resistant to water if moisture ever gets in there. And we have our line across there where we can have our bolts and have a straight mounted toilet. Now I took my knockout right away because one thing I noticed since I applied everything upside down because I was trying to be careful of my tile is I was probably getting a little bit of adhesive as I had this way down into the area where the knockout was right here. And I think that if I would have gotten that glue there and let it set, it would have been harder for me to break out this knockout because it might have grabbed onto it just a little bit. So I went ahead and took my knockout out right away. And then I just put a cloth in here to block for sewer gases until we're ready to install a toilet.